into a lifting belt, how to use it, and how you should not be using it. And also I want to talk about is if this is even appropriate for you and what you need to be able to do in order before you even think about buying a lifting belt, using one at your gym or whatever, some things to consider. So let's get into it. All right, so in the fitness realm, knowing how to use a lifting belt is like extremely rare. And for some reason, as long as I've been in this space, I really haven't seen a lot of people talk about it. So I know you guys do follow a lot of fitness accounts. So just like go ahead and like put your hand up or something like this. If you have even really came across anybody talk about how to use this. Okay, Shelby has heard about, cool. All right, so not a lot of people, right? So to understand this, we first must know about how our body creates stability. And because you guys have been with me, you do know that I have taught you a lot about core stability, how we create it, and things like that. So you've heard it being called the core, and put simply, it is your diaphragm, pelvic floor, and your abdominal wall. And together, these structures support the spine, and it creates pressure within our core. And I want to use an example of a pressure cooker. So think of a pressure cooker. I was thinking about pulling mine out. I won't because it's a mess. But think of a pressure cooker. You have the top lid and it's dome shaped. I think I'm gonna let somebody in. Yep. Okay, so the top lid is dome shaped, and then you have your center, actually, well, whatever, pressure cooker. And then so you have the abdominal wall is your, like the outside of that pressure cooker, and then the bottom, think of it as like your pelvic floor. So using that as an example, it truly is a pressure cooker, your whole entire core, using those three things. Now, these three muscles and structures function differently and how they need to be pulled in to create some of the stability, but generally speaking, you're thinking your diaphragm, which is kind of beveled, shaped like this, and when it contracts, it actually pulls down. I'll go into that in a little bit more detail, but your diaphragm is how you breathe. So yes, you have lungs, but your diaphragm has to be able to contract to move air in and out. So I'm going to go into this a little bit more. So the pressure cooker, which we're calling, is our core. And I use a lot of other examples to demonstrate what your core is. But these structures contract to have the ability to expand and control volume. So I have a picture of a little balloon here because this is expanding our core. This is volume. This is creating pressure. So much like this balloon filling up with air is like you and your core, or this pressure cooker. If we have control over the volume, we have control over the pressure we have in there. And pressure, I'm going to use a lot abbreviated IAP. It is intra-abdominal pressure. So it's the pressure within these components of the walls of the pressure cooker: diaphragm, pelvic floor, and your abdominal wall. So it's necessary as it precedes all movement, which is what the lifting belt is all about. And I'll go and talk about this a little bit later, but you need to have stability before you even can create any movement at all. If I take one single step forward, I am lifting my foot off the ground, and at one point in time, I am moving this limb further away from my body, and I'm having to create stability in order to even move my leg. I have to have stability because right now I am on one foot. On this one foot, I need to have stability. That means I need to have control over this before I can even create that movement. And you guys will notice this a lot in your lifts of like, man, I felt like I had the strength to do that, but my form was collapsing. Or I just feel like I couldn't stay stable underneath that squat. If you've ever thought those things, felt those things, and I've even wondered, how the heck should I be breathing during this lift? How can I help, create more stability? This is what it's all about. And the lifting belt is really a purpose of giving ourselves cues in order to use our own body. So the benefits is, use when spine is loaded. So it provides a brace to push against for creating that intra-abdominal pressure. Being able to apply more force to the bar. So these are some of the benefits of it. And it can help with your technique of your movement. And I really want to emphasize the fact that it can help you apply more force to the bar. So I'm going to break that down. Say you are a 400-pound person, right? And you're trying to lift however much on this squat rack. You're asking to put that force into the bar, and you're already 400 pounds. We have to go against gravity too. So there's so much force being distributed that your body has to maintain that force. And if you have good abdominal pressure, if you have good IAP, that whatever weight you're trying to lift into your squat will not feel as bad because you have created stability. If you don't have stability and you're trying to lift these things, move these bars, these dumbbells, your spine is all over the place and you don't have any stability created, which makes that feel a lot harder. So before you set up into a squat and you really feel like you need stability, you are going to be able to move a lot more weight just because you have that stability. Your body feels safe. When your body feels safe, it's going to let you challenge it and push it further. And the downsides of it though, relying on the belt to create stability at your core. Think of it like maybe you were somebody in high school that always wore ankle bracelets, or not ankle bracelets, ankle guards or braces. And using those over time and time again, throughout your practices, throughout your games, we are essentially telling our ankles, our stabilizers, to turn off. We don't need you anymore. We have an external brace that's doing the job for you. So these muscles aren't needed anymore. Those muscles eventually atrophy and they become weak. And now that moment you take off that ankle brace and you're like, well, my ankles have been protected. They're pretty strong. You actually did the opposite with all that time that you put something guarded around it. Is now your ankles are actually super weak and you're more likely to sprain, roll your ankle, and all that above. So I just am curious too, going to pull this up here. Has anybody wore ankle braces for a sport and wore them for a pretty long time? Sam, did you ever have any ankle sprains that you're just like, whoa, this came out of nowhere?
Yes.
Yeah, sometimes that's what it could be. And not saying that you totally like took away your ankle stabilizers and blah, 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 blah. But a lot of times when a freak accident happens, it's actually not a freak accident. It was the cause of something that happened a while ago that all of a sudden your body's like, had it. It's almost like that phrase, the needle in the haystack, or the needle that broke the camel's back. Whatever those quotes are. Same thing though. It is something that you had done previously and was never really addressed. And since we numbed those muscles and asked them to stop working, the moment you're in a different situation, like you just step off a curb a little bit wrong, there goes your ankle. So that is the downside of this being like your ankle brace and kind of numbing the area. I will share an article. So where I pulled this from, I was reading an article in Elite FTS, and the guy was talking a lot about the downsides of wearing a belt and how he doesn't really recommend it for most people. So I'll kind of segue into that a little bit later too. But also this image is just for that balloon, right? We're filling up this balloon, creating pressure. So how to use a lifting belt. Let's get real sciencey here. So diaphragm contracts by being pulled down closer to the pelvis. So like we mentioned with the pressure cooker, it is the lid is your diaphragm, which is dome shaped. And when it contracts, it gets pulled down by a central tendon. I don't know why I'm backing up. I feel like I'm going to try to demonstrate this. Gets pulled down by its central tendon closer to our pelvis. So what that does is comes from here and it now flattens and collapses. So where's pressure going to go? Is pressure increased or decreased? Pressure's increased because we just took away some of that space. So the contents in your abdomen get pulled down to the pelvic floor and pushed against your abdominal wall. When your abdominal wall expands, pressure remains constant. So when it expands, it still is the same pressure, but we are expanding out. If more pressure is needed to complete a task, and this is just for an example of like, okay, I'm going to do a 100-pound goblet squat, and I use that for an example because that's when I truly start to feel like I really need stability. Then the abdominal wall will contract. So your abs contract to resist the outward force. AKA if this doesn't happen, if you don't withhold this outward force from going out, then you get a hernia. Or then you pee your pants. The force has to go somewhere, right? It has to be shifted because we're scrunching down. And if our abs aren't engaged, if we're not pushing out and controlling how we expand, it's going to shoot through one way or another. I don't know if I've shared examples before when I've talked about this, but I think of it as a pop can too. And I think I have some images from when we did breaking down the big lift of like how pressure needs to be created. And when it is offset, when it is misaligned, pressure is going to shoot out wherever on the path of least resistance. So moving into that is the abs contract to resist this outward force. Less volume equals greater the pressure. So there is an inverse relationship between volume and pressure. This can get very sciencey, but the outward pushing force is the key to all movement. So using a belt properly is about maximizing this force to increase stability of the spine. So let's go into this. That's neat. So what a belt does is it replaces your abdominal wall during stabilization. So the belt is stronger and stiffer, which helps us create more of the intra-abdominal pressure by pushing out into it. The more force within the abdominal cavity, the more pressure pushing against the spine, locking it into place. So it is all about locking your spine into place, creating that pressure so we can move mountains, and not literally, but basically. So I want to know, just put a little hands up, if you feel like you've ever thought that, well, I need to get a stronger core, so I need to suck in. I need to suck in my abs. I need to tighten up. If I'm getting ready to lift, I need to really like scrunch up here, tighten my abs. Has anybody thought that? Heck yeah, I'm sure a lot of you have, because you know what? I have too. So what I want you to do in order to practice this and how it relates to a lifting belt is literally stand like how this girl is. She is standing here, and I call this a Superman position, or let's just say Superwoman. So Superwoman standing like this, she's fierce, she's strong. I want you to use your hands as a guide to breathe into it. So we're going to be pushing. We're going to be pushing out like we are that balloon and push to where our hands are. Your hands are on the side, and this does help you think because it's a tactile cue to your body. Your hands are there, your body recognizes something's there, and you tell yourself to push into your hands when you're breathing in. Your hands will come outwards. And you can also shift it and go this way, breathing back here and up here. You'll fill up the space here. But I really like to have people practice here, putting your hands at your sides. And this is to replicate what the belt will feel like and how you should be pushing into the belt when you use it. Now, the belt is 360, right? And our hands are only here. So imagine with the belt is it's 360 and it's achieving that, what do you want to say, circumferential? I don't know, that circular aspect that we need to be breathing in at all times. So we shouldn't just be breathing out on our sides. We shouldn't just be breathing only in our belly. We need to be completely 360. And that's exactly what the belt helps with you to demonstrate for how you should be doing this, which is why it's super awesome concept that it can literally provide tactile cues throughout your whole core. So you're breathing into all the areas. So practice breathing and pushing your hands in at your sides, and do this before your lift. Highly, 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 highly encourage you, before you do any lift, I want you to be breathing. It doesn't matter if it's a lower body day or an upper body day. Guess what? Both of those come off of our core. So no matter what it is, this needs to be stabilized for anything. For me, myself, I will do a lot of breathing just right before I even start even the warm-up reps. So I can get my body engaged, get my core thinking of like, all right, this is how we should be doing it. And it really does help with, number one, it calms me down, because if I'm a little bit anxious, like today, for example, I don't have a squat person, or I don't have a person to help me in case I fail. I don't have anybody to help me. And obviously I've had the biggest fear of like when your weight comes crashing down on you and you're like looking around for people to come save you and nobody's saving you. So I do have that fear. So to calm myself down and like pep talk myself, I do a lot of this as breathing, but it's also to let my body know and my core like, yo, we need to create stability here. We're going 360 with this. So be ready. And one more thing to do when you're practicing this is it's not enough to just practice filling it up. But what about the second part of the breath? What do we do with that? So that is where you will truly exhale completely and allow everything to crunch in. And that's just practicing getting all air in and getting it all out. And when you get all your air out, you actually ask your abs to crunch and your external and internal oblique to click on. And those two things really help create stability too, because when I mentioned the three components of your core, diaphragm, abdominal wall, in your pelvic floor. Within those are several muscles, especially the abdominal walls that we use, such as external oblique, internal oblique, the superficial abs that you see on the front, six-pack abs, and then there's transverse abs. Transverse kind of crunches everything in like a corset. So I just kind of broadly said it as abdominal wall, but there are a lot of other factors playing into it, and we need to be able to engage those. We need to be able to know what it feels like when our external and internal obliques kick on, because that tells you that, hey, they're there, they're working, and they're there to support you too. So for those of you that thought, yep, I need to suck in order to create stability, that is the most common way that athletes will try to create this stabilization, and it's by crunching or tightening up your abs, really contracting them, sucking your belly button in, and I use this as an example, like sucking in, sucking in your belly into your spine. This does activate your abdominal wall, but it does not do anything with diaphragm or your pelvic floor. It doesn't create any intra-abdominal pressure. So to create intra-abdominal pressure, be like a pop can. And what this is 360 activation, and that's what I've been talking about, is filling up your front belly, your sides, and your low back. What everyone messes up is only pushing force in one direction, either just pushing the belly out, so only doing belly breathing, or only crunching in, sucking that belly button into the spine. The force must be equal in all directions. Where was I at? First, most athletes don't actually know how to do this, which I know some of you are like, yeah, well, okay, I don't think I have to be sucking my belly button, but I have been belly breathing. I know you talk about that a lot. But it's actually the hardest part is getting to turn off your low back and breathing into your low back. Most people cannot do this, me, myself included. Guys, I am seeing a movement therapist 2 to 3 times a month because I have to really fix my pelvic tilt in order for me to stop using my low back for a lot of the things that I do. Not that my low back is really painful or anything, it's truly all stems from my pelvic, and that affects how I sprint, it affects my recovery, it affects how tired my legs will get. If something is not aligned correctly, your body can still get your task done, but at what expense? It got it done for a while, but now, because it's using extra muscles in order to accomplish something, now I'm getting fatigued early on because it's having to use more muscles and more energy in order to complete it. So people are overusing their spinal erectors, which is your low back muscles, to help stabilize, causing that hyperextension of the low back and tilting that pelvis forwards. And you guys, I think when I talked about the big lift too, I definitely talked about this, how that anterior pelvic tilt is here, where that arching of the low back occurs. And most people are definitely using this in order to achieve any sort of stabilization. So if I ask you to belly breathe and just focus on belly breathing, you're going to fill up here. And what does that do? That arches my back even more because I'm only pushing out forward. So pushing out forward is going to arch my back. So in order to alleviate that and to truly fix athletes and how they squat is to kind of turn off all those low back extensors. Think of how many girls are wanting to build a booty and they're hitting lower body, hamstrings, glutes 4 to 5 days a week. That's their posterior chain. They're training all their low stuff here, never having enough recovery, and I guarantee you probably never breathing into their low back during any of this stuff. So now they have been overusing their posterior chain, which is only going to make this pelvic tilt worse. So the diaphragm must be parallel with the pelvic floor. So kind of like how this pop can is, top should match the bottom, be parallel with each other. This centralizes the pressure, much like this can that you see. I don't know why I went over here. Much like this can here, to create that corset for force. If you are malaligned or misaligned, hips dip forward, like I talked about, the anterior pelvic tilt, which is hello, that sexy back pose, but it's really not too sexy. You distribute the pressure unevenly and will likely use your low back to assist with, to assist and lose stability entirely. So as soon as you tilt that pelvis, you're opening up your what? Your abdominal wall. So that outward force that we are supposed to be minimizing to create more intra-abdominal pressure, we kind of leave a leaky spot right for that pressure to be pushed outwards. Those are hernias. Those are low back issues. So protect yourself. We are going to learn this, and you're going to achieve the alignment by this of having your diaphragm matched up with your pelvic by pulling your ribs down while keeping your spine and pelvis in neutral. So I think I mentioned this before on that big lifts, but when you ask, or I ask you to pull your ribs down to your spine, some people might do this. Well, that's still not great because I just arched my back forward in order to achieve that. I just did an ab crunch. So it is truly challenging and difficult to do this, of just truly pulling your ribs down by only using your abs and your hamstrings in order to create that tilt. So practice this when you guys are, heck, even laying in bed. I practice pelvic tilts. I practice them. I made a funny about it on Instagram with that Beyonce thing, but like, yeah, I'm practicing it a lot because I really, really need to work on it so I can protect myself, so I can be doing this for a long time. So some cues that you might have heard when training to try to achieve stabilization in using a weightlifting belt, or that could be anything, push your belly into the belt. So what I just mentioned is when you just truly push in your belly, well, you just took away your whole alignment. So that is really just a faulty cue. Don't use that anymore. Instead, use some of these cues of thinking, all right, push my spine into the belt. That's going to make you focus on back here, which is the most difficult to breathe into and to activate, is that low back, and making sure we're puffing out, right? Because we want to essentially puff out into this belt. We want to be pushing our body into the belt. And the next cue you can use that's really useful is break the belt by pushing into your sides. So that's kind of having this focus here of pushing out into your, it's almost like you want to push so much into that weightlifting belt all around you that you're going to bust it open. And that might be the only time it's appropriate to bust open a belt. If you're busting open your pant belt, that's a whole other issue. But in this one instance and time in your life, shoot for breaking that belt. So practice makes perfect. Again, so to feel pressure in your back, sides, and belly, this exercise right here I have set up helps not just push out into the belly, because we still want into the belly, right? But we want 360. We want to make sure that's not the only thing we're focusing on. But this helps you breathe into your belly, and just enough, so much that when you breathe enough into your belly, you're going to feel the pressure on your thighs here, and that blocks your belly from expanding more. Therefore, it's going to go into your back. So this really does help breathe into your back and really create some of that pressure back there. So to do this, take like 3 to 5 sets of 10 breaths and hold for a 30-second breath at the bottom. And what I mean at the bottom is that exhale that I talked to you about, of like really elongating the exhale and make sure we get everything out. So you really feel those abs kick on in your breath. And that's a good place to fill back up with air of like, okay, I feel it here. Now I'm going to span all the way around. So this helps reduce some overcompensation of our extensors. And then you can actually click this and it takes you to a video that demonstrates this. I'll save that for you guys to click to watch because, well, I can show you later if we have time. But I thought it was pretty cool that I like put it in here, like you can click it. Very proud of myself. So some key takeaways. Proper stabilization is required for all movement. Like when we are required to use more force, such as during a lift, that is when we're going to tap into all 3 of those components. But for the day-to-day thing, we really need stabilization at all times. We just need more using that intra-abdominal pressure when we're lifting. I don't need much intra-abdominal pressure to reach for this. Like I'll have good stability just with my general core and activating a few things without having to actually think about pushing into my sides. But that is also because we do train a lot with our core. A lot of the movements that you do, a squat, a deadlift, are all functional movements which address your core. So that is why they're called the big functional lifts, is because they really use your whole entire body. Even though you could see squats and deadlifts as more of a lower body day type of workout, it literally still addresses your core, which is the, I guess, thing that you need before any and all movement. So we need to create intra-abdominal pressure by pulling down the diaphragm parallel with the pelvic floor and resisting the outward pressure of the abdominal cavity. So we're making sure that our abs don't just go out here, we're containing it in by also breathing out into it too. Intra-abdominal pressure is created by the abdominal wall, pelvic floor, and diaphragm, and that's containing of a 360 part pressure, pushing out into all sides of your core. It is not achieved by sucking in or drawing your belly into a spine. There's a time when there's a place for that, but that is not how we create intra-abdominal pressure for a big lift. Active 360 of the abdominal wall, especially in the sides and the back, which is the most difficult. So really start to place an emphasis on pushing on those areas which are the most difficult to push out. But again, this is just a tool, right? As with most things that we do, there's a tool to something that can really help things be achieved better. But from what I said about when I started this, if we're using something too much, at what point would we give our body the ability not to create stabilization on its own? So before you start reaching for a belt, this is where you should start. Work on the proper movement patterns with all the movements you are doing first. So understanding how to go through a squat, how to go through a deadlift, how to be breathing during it, how to be bracing. There is literally no substitute for technique and form. If you don't got that down, you have no business trying to use a weightlifting belt or any other tool that could help. Really have to dive into that. And that's awesome because this week I'm going to be asking you tomorrow. Haven't decided if it's through WhatsApp or whatnot, but I'm going to be asking you guys to drop in some more workout videos. So I want you to film yourself doing a squat, if all of you guys have that, and then deadlift, and then you can show me whatever you want. But I want some videos of you guys doing your workouts so I can critique form. I can know if you're doing it right. I can give you guidance on how to fix it. And then lastly, I want to see how intense you're doing. So if you're just lollygagging through a bicep curl, not that you would film this, maybe you would, maybe you don't know how to do it. But I want to see a little bit more intensity with that. You actually putting a lot of effort into your lift. So another component would be to practice proper bracing. So this could look a couple different ways. Pushing out 360 into front, sides, and back. Exhaling slowly and pushing out all the air until your abs crunch and your internal oblique kick on. You can do this laying in bed. You can do this in these photos right here. This was breathing out into the sides. This was exhaling completely. This was inhaling, and this was how I used my cues to be breathing in the front and back. Actually, I prefer the video that I had attached on here earlier, where you're in that position where you're like, I don't even know what position that's called off the top of my head, but where I'd be bent over and then I'm truly just like my stomach is hitting my thighs, so it's kind of blocked there. But it still allows you to get breath into your belly, but just not so much, so it does shift it around. And then Valsalva maneuver. I know in my therapy realm, in my schooling and education, we were taught that Valsalva is bad, that you shouldn't be doing that. It can cause blood clots, high blood pressure, people could die. That was literally taking one condition for certain people that have heart conditions or maybe breathing issues and asking them to do this, and that is somewhat dangerous. But for the general person that is an athlete, that is weightlifting, that is doing these things that we are all doing, this is really important to practice and do it during a lift. So what I would do for this is to push out entirely. So think of if somebody was going to punch your stomach. Right away, you go, what do? You push out. You push out 360. That's exactly how I've been talking about through this, that you need to be bracing. So basically what you do is you hold that, or for my example, I just take a big breath in and I make sure I'm pushed out in all directions, and then I'll hold it. I'll hold that breath and go through, say it's a squat. I'll go down into the squat, and when I get at the bottom, I'll slowly like open my mouth or let some of that air out slowly as I'm coming up. So I'm exhaling slowly as I come up, or two, what you can do is keep that breath held the entire time, and then you only reset your breath when you need to. If you're more advanced at this, you could probably go through 3, 4, 5 reps without taking a breath because you kept that. But for me, I'll kind of work between both of those. I'll do the exhale. So another good way to practice this is counting your reps too. If you guys ever forget, like, oh, I don't know how many reps I'm on, a good thing to do is to start to speak that rep number as you're at the bottom of it or as you're moving it back towards you. So you're speaking it, letting some air out, and then you can reset. I really, really love that because it also helps keep track of your reps. And I have headphones in, so I really don't care who's hearing me count. I don't even know. Sometimes I don't even think about it and I'm doing it, and highly, highly, highly recommend doing that. But I can't hold my breath as much, especially if I have pretty intense weight on me or something. If I'm pushing for like a PR or something, I can't hold my breath through 1 or 2 reps. Like I have to reset at the top. So just a couple different strategies that can help with proper bracing. And you can practice this on lighter loads if you want to really implement some of these breathing strategies. Oh, who is this girl? Yeah, all right. Anyways, that's the end of it. So yeah, what do you guys think?